Can I go and start?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabine Karki. I'm a senior biomedical engineering student here at Johns Hopkins. Today, I'll be presenting our work on Benegraft, which is spun out of the design team program here at Hopkins 2 years ago. So to start, I want to ask you, what if you had to go in for surgery and there's a 1 in 4 chance that you had to have a revision procedure for the for the surgery you had to do? Now, this is a reality for a lot of surgeries, but especially high for the rhinoplasty, which the rhinoplasties are surgeries in which a plastic surgeon or ENT specialist focuses on improving some sort of aesthetic or functional aspect of the nose. These are often can be cosmetic, but they can also be reconstructive, such as after some sort of facial trauma. And rhinoplasties are the #1 most common procedure performed in facial reconstruction. It's the most common plastic surgery in the US and in the world, with over 220,000 performed in the nation every year. But despite how common this procedure is, they're extremely difficult to master. And the reason for that is the nose, of course, projects into 3D space, and you have tissue that needs to be shaped very perfectly and symmetrical. It's a challenge you don't run into as often with other types of specialty and other types of challenging procedures. So why is the revision rate for rhinoplasties so high? If we look at all rhinoplasties overall, you have about a 23% overall revision rate, which can be higher depending on intersurgeon variability. And traditionally, the way that these rhinoplasties are done is in about 90% of these procedures, in about 200,000 cases, you have cartilage grafts that are being used. And these cartilage grafts are pieces of cartilage that are placed into the nose to help shape it. And these can come from the patient's septum, which is another part of the nose, the rib cartilage, or their ear cartilage. One huge problem with the way that grafts are currently prepared in rhinoplasty procedures is that there's a huge risk of warping. Currently, you take a block of cartilage out from the patient and you carve it down almost like a sculpture typically with a scalpel. And when you use a rigid piece of cartilage like this, there's a high risk of after the fact or resorption, and it's extremely difficult to shape the cartilage and create a symmetric shape. Another technique that has come about in recent decades that has gained popularity is the use of diced cartilage glue grafts. Now, what this means is you take a scalpel or some other blade and you dice up the cartilage into these tiny 1 to 1.5 millimeter size pieces, or sorry, 0.5 to 1 millimeter size pieces. And then you use tissue glue to shape it into almost Play-Doh consistency. This is much better because the surgeon can get a much better final shape of the graft before putting it in the nose. And it also has a much lower revision rate. So why don't all surgeons use diced grafts then if they're better for the patient? The reason is dicing is an extremely laborious process. It can take up to 2 hours in the operating room. Based on surgeon validation we've done and shadowing a lot of procedures, it typically takes around 40 to 45 minutes. It can take up to 2 hours. And this effort of dicing cartilage is the reason that there's limited surgical adoption. So our team has been working for the past 2 years to develop a device that can much more rapidly dice cartilage for the surgeon. And here I can show you what we hope for our Benegraft rolling dice to look like when it's complete, when we have our MVP. So we can see here that the cartilage is placed inside the device, and it doesn't require any power, completely disposable tool, single use per procedure. And you can see at the bottom here an image of what would take if that same quantity of cartilage to be diced by a surgeon versus with our dicer. So we're significantly faster. Here is a time lapse. We can see that in about 3 minutes, we can go from a solid piece of cartilage to something that's completely diced and uniform, which is something that a surgeon needs. So what other tools are in there? What else is available for surgeons to use? So there's several other cartilage processing tools available, but none of these are able to do all of the following, which are reducing the time to actually process the grafts, can create consistent and replicable grafts, meaning regardless of the surgeon skill or if another member of the operating team is doing it, you can get consistent results, and maintains cell viability because you don't want cell death. That's a common problem with carved grafts or diced pieces that are resulting in crushed cartilage or too small of pieces. There's no devices on the market yet that are specifically designed to process cartilage and dice it, but there are devices that crush cartilage. And the current standard here in the first column, as you can see, is just using a manual scalpel or a dermatome blade. So what is the value that our tool offers? So if we look at other devices on the market, these cartilage crushing devices, which don't dice cartilage and often kill cells and result in worse outcomes, these are priced around $150 to almost $400. We believe our device can be competitively priced at $150 for a disposable tool on a per procedure basis. If we assume conservatively that it takes 40 minutes to dice cartilage, and we know that we can do it in 3 minutes, then we're saving 37 minutes of operating time per procedure in a rhinoplasty procedure, which typically takes 1 to 1.5 hours. At an estimated cost of $36 of OR time per minute, and then subtracting the $150 instrument cost, we're saving per procedure $1,182 to the facility. And if we're looking at a medium to large size hospital that's performing 50 rhinoplasty procedures a month, and this is about in line with expectations since rhinoplasties are the most common facial plastic procedure. Over the course of a year, to a hospital, we can save over $700,000 just in time savings alone. So what does our business model look like? Our primary customers and end users are hospitals and private facilities. However, a small venture, we're aware that branching out and establishing relationships with hospitals would be very challenging, sort of inefficient. So we're partnering with distributors who already have access to a big network of hospitals to sell our device. We've approached Black & Black Surgical and Marina Medical, which are a large instruments firm and a smaller rhinoplasty-focused firm specifically, to start discussing initial partnerships. We chose this indirect sales strategy because it's ideal for single-use surgical commodities like ours, which require minimal customization. We can preserve our unique branding, and reimbursement of device, we plan to come through bundled CPT coding. By pursuing this efficiency strategy, we can then be focused on saving time because it allows us to be bundled under an existing CPT code. So what does our product validation look like so far? So in 2019, we received the JHU I-Core Site Grant, which allowed us to talk to over 30 plastic surgeons to verify the biggest problems in the market. We've since talked to over 50. We've been part of the Loyola and the Johns Hopkins Accelerator programs, which we're currently in. And we've submitted a provisional patent for our technology. We've completed one manuscript describing the benefits of our device, and a second clinical use manuscript is under preparation. We've also presented our device at the world's largest plastic surgery conference last year in San Diego. So why are we applying to the BPC? The $10,000 would really help us with our next phase, which is doing the testing for the second clinical study that consists of product development, clinical validation, and marketing and business development with a resulting publication. This is our team. I'm the founder of this team, and within our team, we have engineers and R&D experts. We also have people who are well-versed in market strategy and IP strategy, and we work with Dr. Patrick Byrne, who's the director of the Johns Hopkins Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery Department at Hopkins. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Sabine. A question for you on intellectual property, novel use. So what's your strategy here? Is this a novel use application? Is it quick to market? How easily can someone skirt your IP and that you may be looking to file and build a comparable device?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So our IP strategy from the start was, we're aware that we're creating a dicing tool, and this is something that could be perceived as something that could be easily circumvented. When we were submitting our patent, we tried to cover as many broad uses of this as possible, meaning like all other different iterations of this device. And we also try to be defensive in saying, a secondary market for this device could be tissue banks, because especially if you're working with juvenile patients or with older patients who don't have much cartilage that can be harvested, there's a need for cartilage from cadavers, from tissue banks that's ordered in and implanted. Now, these tissue banks might be interested in pre-processing diced cartilage and then supplying it that way to surgeons. So in our provisional patent submission, we try to cover as many of those indications, whether in other spaces like orthopedics or other reconstructive procedures, as well as just other companies that could, potentially see use for diced cartilage, even in food processing. And in terms of pathway to market, the great thing about our device is since we're externally processing cartilage, we're not implanting any part of our device into the patient, we are sort of the equivalent of a scalpel in that we are cutting cartilage. And so we are an FDA Class 1 exempt device, so our pathway to market would be very rapid. It wouldn't require traditional FDA clearance. It might be required of a more complex medical device because we're a surgical instrument.
I have a question with regards to your price point. How did you arrive at it?
Sure. So initially, we talked about having a higher price point that was clear. Let me take this to that was more comparable to higher end cartilage crushers, sort of in the $300 to $400 range. But we realized we feel like there's a greater pathway toward revenue, and it's safer to create a device that's disposable after each use. Based on we've talked to about 15 to 20 surgeons right now to talk to them about what sort of pricing would be acceptable to you. And these surgeons we talked to are out of private practice. So we still want to talk to hospital value analysis committees to have a better understanding of what they would want in pricing for a device like this. But we think 150 would be competitive for a device that would cost about $30 to manufacture in a sterile, to manufacture and package sterilely.
Have you spoken to private practice plastic surgeons about whether they think this would give them a competitive edge in terms of cosmetic outcomes and cash pay clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of private practice surgeons, at least a lot of the very successful ones, are out in the West Coast. So when we were out in San Diego last October, we talked to Jason Diamond, who is, well, we learned later he's Kim Kardashian's plastic surgeon, but that's besides the point. And they basically said this would be very useful for them because they often have a whole team of their nurses or other members of the surgical team that dice along with them. And so this would allow any member of the surgical team to do this. And if they can offer, to their patients saying like, we can use this technique on you that can result in better aesthetic outcomes, I think it's a win-win for everybody. So this can be seen as sort of a marketing tool too, or even in cosmetic procedures, not just facial.
I mean, I'm surprised that you're not going for a B2C model with private pay cosmetic procedures, because I think this would be well adopted. Have you thought about like Vegas Cosmetic Surgery or the aesthetic show in Vegas? Any of those?
So not those in particular we haven't thought about, but that's absolutely something we could explore. A lot of the conferences we wanted to go to sort of in May, a lot of them, there's one in Miami we couldn't go to, they were all canceled in the current environment.
Sure.
Do you know the breakdown of case ratio done at surgical centers at a lot of these private centers versus hospitals? It'll be a different sales organization.
So sorry, do you mean like the payer mix for this?
Or rhinoplasties, how much of them are done actually in hospitals and how many are done at those ambulatory surgical centers for?
So from what we know so far, it looks like about 30 to 40% are done in hospitals and the rest are done in private practice.
A lot of it, I assume at this point, is probably done in office, in their in-office procedure rooms, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So I actually, just to kind of build off of Scott's point and his question, how about, what do you know about biologics distributors and folks like that as potential channel partners?
Right. So we've talked to MTF Biologics. They're one of the biggest cadaveric tissue suppliers. We haven't approached them specifically saying like we would want to partner with you because we want to focus. I think we think there's a better initial market in fleshing out surgical instruments before we talk to biologics firms or ones that are further upstream. The reason for that is, part of commercializing this device is also going to be a little bit of physician education, because a lot of surgeons know about diced cartilage. They just don't use it because it's just like, it takes a lot of effort. So it's going to involve, we think we want to start maybe doing training programs at like residency programs to sort of get people involved in using this tool early in their career. So that way, they're not going to go back and say, oh, like for a surgeon who's never used diced cartilage their whole life, it's going to be kind of a barrier for them to call up MTF and say, hey, instead of sending me your typical cartilage, send me this new diced one. I think it'll be much more compelling to have the device in their hands, show them what diced cartilage can do, and then we can talk about like more upstream, I guess, channels.
You'd be surprised though how much distributors do on behalf of the manufacturers at this point, even by way of education and sales marketing.
Sure.
So I wouldn't, if as part of your business model, I would definitely. I know you have some time, but I would definitely look into that a little bit more. Because
I'm gonna piggyback on that with things like Allergan or Galderma that are already actively selling implantables like breast dogs and stuff like that to physicians. This might be a viable path to market for them to get into the rhinoplasty space.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Okay, definitely we'll look into that.
In
Do you have an estimate? Oh,
sorry,
the
time
time.
for the last, but if it's quick, you can go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Time for questions has elapsed, but if it was a quick comment, feel free to go ahead.
It's okay. We can talk about it later. Thank you.
All right.